This is not a story about a new exotic virus emerging from a distant jungle. It's not a threat that requires a BSL-4 containment suit or one that dominates our headlines with daily case counts. This is a story about the end of a miracle. The miracle was penicillin. It was the azithromycin, the ciprofloxacin, the entire arsenal of antibiotics that allowed us to build the modern world. We take them for granted that a scraped knee, a root canal, or a routine surgery will not become a death sentence. For nearly a century, that assumption held. But today, in 2025, that certainty is eroding. This is antimicrobial resistance, or AMR. And it is not a future problem. It is a present-day, silent pandemic. You have likely heard the sensationalist claims, the headlines warning of a post-antibiotic apocalypse, or an impending medical dark age. This language is designed to provoke fear. And in this channel, we do not traffic in fear. We traffic in data. Our guiding principle is Primum Non Nocere. First, do no harm. And fear without context does harm. But the data itself is stark. The World Health Organization, a Tier 1 source, provides the global overview, and its language is unequivocal. AMR is one of the top 10 global public health threats facing humanity. But to understand why, we must go deeper. We must look at this 2022 Tier 2 study from the Lancet. It's a foundational piece of research that analyzed data from over 200 countries. It found that in 2019, 127 million deaths were directly attributable to bacterial AMR. That is more than HIV, AIDS, and malaria combined. The study further estimated that nearly 5 million deaths were associated with it. This is not a hypothetical. It is a clinical and economic reality. But what does it mean for you? And how did we get here? To find the truth, we must deconstruct this silent pandemic. We need to answer 4 fundamental questions. 1. What is the biological mechanism? How does a bacterium, on a genetic level, learn to defeat a drug designed to kill it? 2. How did we accelerate this process? We will investigate the human systems, in medicine and agriculture, that poured fuel on this fire. 3. What does the very latest 2025 data from sources like the ECDC actually tell us about the specific superbugs threatening us today? And 4. Why is the pipeline for new antibiotics broken? This is our roadmap. Our investigation begins now. Welcome to the core of our investigation. Before we dissect the data, I must make our mission clear. This channel operates on a principle of radical transparency. We will not show you a single statistic without also showing you its source. We will navigate this together using the tiered sourcing framework as our guide, distinguishing between the rapid, preliminary reports of Tier 1, the robust, peer-reviewed evidence of Tier 2, and the foundational context of Tier 3. The process of science, of sorting signal from noise, is the story. Chapter 1. The Biological Imperative. Our investigation begins not with a human failing, but with a biological fact. It is a process that has been running for over 3 billion years: evolution. Bacteria, like all living things, are wired to survive. And antibiotics are quite simply the most intense evolutionary pressure we have ever applied to them. To understand this, let's visualize the mechanism. Imagine a 3D model of a single bacterium, a simple organism. When we introduce an antibiotic, let's picture it as a key. It's designed to fit a specific lock on the bacterium, perhaps a protein needed to build its cell wall. When the key turns, the bacterium dies. This is how it should work. But in any population of billions of bacteria, there is variation. One bacterium, through a random, spontaneous mutation, might be born with a slightly different lock. The antibiotic key no longer fits. This is survival of the fittest, playing out on a microscopic scale. The antibiotic kills off all its neighbors, and this one resistant bacterium, this mutant, is left to replicate. Within hours, there is a new population of millions, all of which are resistant. We can see this clearly in laboratory videos, a Tier 3 source. A famous 2016 experiment from Harvard Medical School visualized this on a giant petri dish, a megaplate. Bacteria were placed at one end, and as they grew towards the other, they encountered increasingly higher doses of antibiotics. You can watch in a stunning time lapse as the bacteria stop, as the wave of growth pauses, and then, inevitably, a few resistant mutants break through, conquer that section, and continue their march. But this spontaneous mutation is only half the story. The truly frightening mechanism is what we call horizontal gene transfer. Bacteria are uniquely capable of sharing their survival tools. Let's look at a 3D animation of this process. One resistant bacterium can connect to a non-resistant one and pass it a small, circular piece of DNA called a plasmid. This plasmid is a genetic cheat sheet. It contains the code for the resistance gene, perhaps a new protein that actively pumps the antibiotic out of the cell, or an enzyme that literally cuts the antibiotic molecule in half. This is not inheritance from a parent. This is a soldier handing a shield and a sword to a civilian in the middle of a battle. This is how resistance to a brand new drug can spread across the globe, and even between different species of bacteria, with terrifying speed. This is the biological imperative. It is not malice. It is not an evil plan. It is simply life finding a way. The bacteria are not the villains of this story. They are just following the rules of evolution. We are the ones who changed the game. Chapter 2. The Human Accelerant. This biological process, which might have taken millennia to become a crisis, was put into hyperdrive by human systems. We accelerated the evolution. We provided the proving ground. Our first area of inquiry is medicine itself. Let's examine a body of Tier 2 research, like this 2021 meta-analysis from the Lancet, which synthesizes data from hundreds of hospital and outpatient studies. The findings are sobering. It shows a clear correlation between the volume of antibiotics prescribed in a country and the rate of resistance to those same antibiotics. Here we can see a chart from that study. It plots prescriptions per 1,000 people on the x-axis against resistance percentage on the y-axis. As the prescription line goes up, the resistance line follows. This is not a coincidence. It is a direct causal link. For decades, we used these drugs not just for cure, but for convenience. A patient presents with a cough and a fever, a classic viral infection. The doctor, facing pressure to do something, and with only 10 minutes for the appointment, writes a prescription for an antibiotic just in case. This is a critical error. Antibiotics do not work on viruses. They do not treat the cold or the flu. But they do act on the trillions of bystander bacteria in your gut, your microbiome. Every time you take an unnecessary antibiotic, you are running a megaplate experiment inside your own body. You are killing the helpful, susceptible bacteria and creating a perfect, empty environment for any resistant strains to flourish. This overprescription, driven by both patient expectation and clinical habit, became systemic. And it wasn't just in humans. Our second, and arguably larger accelerant was agriculture. For most of the late 20th century, we used antibiotics in livestock, not primarily to treat sickness, but for growth promotion. It was discovered that low, subtherapeutic doses of antibiotics made animals gain weight faster on less food. Let's look at the data. This graph, compiled from multiple Tier 2 agricultural and economic sources, shows the global tonnage of antibiotics used in agriculture versus human medicine. In many countries, for many years, the agricultural use, shown here in biohazard orange, dwarfs human use. This practice, now banned in the EU but still common elsewhere, is the perfect storm for resistance. These are not high doses to kill bacteria. They are low, constant doses. This doesn't kill the bacteria, it teaches them. It gently selects for, and breeds, generations of resistant bacteria in the gut of the animal. And as we can see from this diagram from the CDC, a Tier 1 source, that resistance does not stay on the farm. It is shed in the animal's waste. It contaminates the water and the soil. It gets onto the produce. It is present on the meat during processing. It has created a vast environmental reservoir of resistance genes, a library of shields and swords that can be shared through that horizontal gene transfer with the bacteria that infect humans. We created a global feedback loop. We used medicine's most precious resource to make food slightly cheaper. Chapter 3. Deconstructing the 2025 data. This brings us to today. The biological imperative, supercharged by the human accelerant, has produced a clear and present threat. The superbugs are not science fiction. They are here. They are in our hospitals. And the 2025 data, from Tier 1 sources like the ECDC, the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, provides the most up-to-date snapshot. Let's pull up the ECDC's latest surveillance dashboard. This is a Tier 1 source, remember, so it is fast, it is current, but it is also provisional. We use it to see the trend. What we are looking at is a map of Europe. The colors represent the prevalence of a specific bug. Let's filter for carbapenem-resistant Acinetobacter baumannii. The carbapenems are a last resort class of antibiotics. They are the heavy artillery we use when nothing else works. Rate 10%. Now look at the map. In 2010, the map was mostly green and yellow. Now in 2025, we see large swathes of deep epidemiological yellow and biohazard orange. This signifies that in many regions, for this specific infection, the last resort drug simply fails. Let's be precise. What are these threats? First, there is MRSA, or methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. It's the one you've likely heard of. It's a classic superbug, responsible for skin and bloodstream infections. The data on MRSA is actually a mixed story. In some countries, as this line graph shows, aggressive hospital infection control has actually lowered the rate. This is a crucial point. It proves that this is not a hopeless fight. The more pressing 2025 concern is what we call the escape pathogens, an acronym for the 6 most dangerous, multi-drug-resistant bacteria. These include Klebsiella pneumonia and E. coli, bacteria that are common and commonly live in our own gut. Let's focus on CRE, or carbapenem-resistant Enterobacteriaceae. These are the true nightmare bacteria. The data is alarming. This 2024 Tier 2 report in the Lancet Infectious Diseases Journal tracks the spread of a specific gene, an NDM1 plasmid, that confers resistance to almost everything. We can see its journey on this animated map, tracking its first detection in 2008. From India, the lines of transmission spread globally. It wasn't carried by a cough. It was carried by travelers, by medical tourism, by the simple, interconnected nature of our modern world. Today, in 2025, when a patient in a hospital in Berlin or Chicago or here in Vin gets a CRE infection, the doctors must look at their chart, at the list of available antibiotics. And they may find that nothing is marked S for susceptible. They are left with I for intermediate or R for resistant. They are forced to use older, more toxic drugs, like colistin, a drug we abandoned decades ago because it was so damaging to the kidneys. They are, in effect, practicing 1950s medicine. This is the reality. The post-antibiotic era is not a single, dramatic event. It is a slow, creeping, case-by-case failure of our last lines of defense. Chapter 4. The Broken Pipeline. This leads to the obvious, desperate question. If our old drugs are failing, where are the new ones? This, perhaps, is the most complex part of our investigation. The answer is not biological. It is economic. The pipeline for new antibiotics is broken. Let's look at the data. This first chart shows the number of new antibiotics approved by the FDA by decade. In the 1950s and 60s, the golden age, this bar is high. We discovered and approved dozens of new classes. Now look at the bar for the 2000s, the 2010s, and now the 2020s. The bar is almost flat. Major pharmaceutical companies have, for the most part, abandoned the field. Why? The answer is simple. A new antibiotic is a terrible investment. Let's compare it to a different drug, one for a chronic condition like high cholesterol. We can visualize this on a simple graph. A patient takes a cholesterol drug, a statin, every single day for the rest of their life. The line showing revenue in green is long, stable, and goes up for decades. Now, let's plot a new, life-saving antibiotic on the same graph. The line, in red, is completely different. When a new antibiotic is approved, it is not prescribed. It is correctly put on a shelf and held in reserve to be used only for the most resistant infections, to protect its effectiveness. So, a company might spend 15 years and over $1 billion to develop a drug that, if they are successful, will be used by a few thousand patients for just 7 to 14 days. The economic model has failed. We are in a paradox. The medical value of a new antibiotic is almost infinite, but its market value is almost zero. This is a profound market failure, and it is the final and most challenging piece of the AMR puzzle. We are facing an evolutionary threat, accelerated by our own habits, and we have systematically dismantled the economic engine we need to build our defenses. We have a biological imperative, a human accelerant, a clear and present data-driven danger, and a broken pipeline. This is the reality of the silent pandemic in 2025. So this is the anatomy of our silent pandemic. It is not a single linear failure. It is a complex interlocking crisis where 4 distinct factors have converged. First, as we saw in our biological deep dive, we are fighting an opponent that operates on an evolutionary timescale of minutes and hours, not years. Bacteria are designed to adapt. Second, we took that natural, biological imperative, and, through our own systems in medicine and agriculture, we created a global, decades-long boot camp. We accelerated their evolution. We taught them to fight. Third, as the 2025 data the ECDC and the Lancet clearly shows us, the graduates of that boot camp, the CRE, the MRSA, the escape pathogens, are now present here in our clinical environments, turning routine procedures into high-stakes gambles. And finally, just as this threat reached a critical mass, we discovered our armory was empty. The economic model for creating new weapons, the antibiotic pipeline, has been allowed to rust and collapse. This, then, is the grand synthesis. This is the aha moment. The reason a simple infection in 2025 is more threatening than it was in 1985 is not because of a new killer bug. It is because of a systemic failure. Biology, human habit, and economics have all locked into a perfect negative feedback loop. This brings us back to our first question from Act 1. We are faced with this stark, mathematical reality. So, should we panic? Should you, the curious skeptic, fear that a paper cut or a routine dental visit will be the end? The evidence we have examined, the data we have deconstructed, shows unequivocally no. Panic is a paralytic. It is a response to a sudden, overwhelming, and unanalyzed threat. But we have analyzed the threat, we have looked at the data, we have deconstructed the mechanisms. The antidote to fear is not optimism, it is understanding. And understanding demands a different response. This is the Primum Non Nocere verdict. First, do no harm. The harm in this case is to continue treating antibiotics as a disposable convenience. The verdict is that our 20th century relationship with these miracle drugs is over. It was based on a false premise of human dominance over nature. The new relationship, the one that will carry us through the 21st century, must be one of stewardship. We must stop thinking of antibiotics as a right and start treating them as a fragile, precious, and shared global resource, like clean air or fresh water. So, what is the outlook? This is not a story without hope. It is a story that demands a new, more intelligent chapter. The challenge is no longer just scientific, it is now political and economic. The what to watch for next is not a new drug, but a new model. We are seeing the first glimmers. We can see them in novel subscription-style payment systems, like the one being trialed in the United Kingdom, which pays companies for access to a new antibiotic, not for the number of pills sold. This breaks the broken pipeline. We see it in the rapid expansion of genomic surveillance, which tracks resistance genes as they emerge. The path forward is one of meticulous, calm, and data-driven stewardship. It means better diagnostics, knowing if you have a bacterial infection before a prescription is written. It means embracing conservation. It means investing in new economic models that treat these drugs with the value they deserve. The silent pandemic is here, but it is not a monster in the dark. It is a complex system, and we have the blueprint. We have the data. The first step was to see it clearly.